as a larger-than-life figure, Skip, and the thing that he started out as is he's least known for, and that is a Hall of Fame Super Bowl winning coach.
Yep.
I'm old enough to remember John Madden, the football coach. I'm also old enough to remember having him call some of my football games and understanding how special that was, realizing that he was the #1 team. Skip, he started out at CBS, and the thing was, when he originally started out, he was not paired with Pat Summerall. I'm old enough to remember Pat Summerall was paired with Tom Brookshire. You remember that.
Do I?
And then he came to Fox. Then he went to Monday Night Football. Then he went to Sunday Night Football on NBC. So he's been called football games, Super Bowl and big games for all major networks that had the NFL. And Skip, I think the thing is that he took the very complex game of football and made it simple. Skip, we can get into a bunch. We can get a 3-by-1. We can get fire zone. We can get cover 5. But that's not what he did. He made it simple. He said, what the Dallas Cowboys are trying to do here, they're trying to get Evan Smith in this alley. And what they do, they took Nate Newton, and they took Mark Stepnoski, and they powered through here, and they pulled Eric Williams around. And you see here, he did a boom. Skip, he was animated. We haven't seen that since. He's the gold standard in commentary because just like he was animated on the sideline, he was animated in the booth. He heard the boom, the bam, and the circling of the sweat and the perspiration when it was cold and guys were sweating and he would circle that. He made it cool to do all of that. Skip, and another thing. On Thanksgiving, wasn't nobody giving out no turkey. Wasn't nobody giving out no turducken, no dressing, no pies. He did that. Now everybody give you a meal on Thanksgiving, don't they, Skip?
Turducken.
He did that.
You know what it was? It was turkey and duck and chicken.
Yes.
All rolled into one. Okay.
And I'm like, because when I first saw it, I was like, hold up. A turkey ain't got that many legs. How you got 8 legs on a turkey? But somehow he came up with that, Skip. And like I said, when you go in those production meetings before the night before the Saturday before the game, Skip, and have him talk to you, and he would always ask me, how's your brother? Covered my brother a lot, obviously with the NFC, Fox having the NFC. He covered my brother a lot. Brett Favre talked about he narrated basically his career because
he did.
It's kind of like the Cowboys and the Packers in the 90s. That was it. Also the 49ers. And stuff. He would always ask me when he come do some of the Broncos game, he would ask me, how's your brother? He said, your brother was on the Hall of Fame arc. He was going to have a great career. He would tell me, Mike said you turn yourself into a great block. Skip, he was just so personable. He was just such a great man. And I think that, if you're probably 10 years or younger, you only know him as the Madden game. And if you're probably 30 years, you don't realize that you probably only know him as a broadcaster. Somebody you and I age, you understand the transition that he transitioned to and became great at all. The winning percentage in which he had at the Raiders, Skip, in 10 years, he only lost 32 games. In 10 years. And to transition to become a broadcaster, and he said, well, I didn't really want to be a broadcaster. When I got out of football and they asked me to do it, and I was like, well, if I don't do it, they might not ever ask me again. And he never looked back. Skip, he's the gold standard. When it comes to color, there's a lot of guys that do it, and there's a lot of guys that do it well at our network and other networks. Ain't bad. He just had a way with it. It's giving the man cruiser, when the man cruiser put, because he wouldn't fly. He was afraid of something happened early in his career that he didn't get on a flight and something happened. And he also
was just claustrophobic.
He was. Afraid of heights. Mr. Summerall was explaining that. Skip, and that bus, the man cruiser, when you see that thing pull up, you out there practice on a Friday, Skip, and you see that thing pull up in the parking lot, it's a big game. You might have thought it was a big game because you played. Nah. It needed him and Mr. Summerall to pull up for you to realize the magnitude of the game because it was going to 75, 80% of the country. There wasn't no regional, there wasn't no situation going to only be broadcast in your area. When Coach Madden showed up, Mr. Summerall showed up, Skip, you better play a bit on your best behavior because everybody's watching. And you wanted him to say great things. Skip, I would go home and listen because I have the game recorded. I want to hear what Coach Madden said about me. Did I play good? Was I one of those great players that I've heard him talked about before I got into the NFL? Oh, okay, that's me. Skip, it's a sad, sad day for the NFL because they lost a great coach. They lost a great broadcaster. They lost a great man. Yeah, the video game, Skip, that bears his name in 1988. And a lot of our generation, that's all they know him for. But he was so much more than that. And I'm so glad that he got an opportunity to see what people actually thought of him and to hear them. Because a lot of that, Skip, was hearing him, watch him, hearing what others said about him. So It's a sad, sad day for the sporting world, for the football community. But that was a great man, and I'm glad I got an opportunity to know who John Madden was.
Thank you for everything you just said. And I would also like to point out that John Madden created the gold standard of all-star teams called the All-Madden team. And Shannon Sharpe and his brother Sterling made the All-Madden team.
5 times.
And when you speak about it, it's almost like it was the highlight of your whole career, including being enshrined in Canton in the Hall of Fame.
It was, Skip, because you know what Coach Madden represented. And for him to think that, okay, there's only so many guys. Everybody, it wasn't like 75, 80 guys made it. There was only like 11 guys on offense, 11 guys on defense, and you had your specialists. And if he thought that you were all Madden, it meant something. Guys really sincerely, Skip, wanted that leather jacket. They wanted that T-shirt or that sweatshirt that came along with being selected to that ball club. Ask Michael Irvin, ask Emmett, ask Troy, ask those guys that made the team how much it meant to get that package in the mail that had that jacket that had all Madden on the back. I wanted to get it, Skip, but I wouldn't have been able to get it here in time. But let people see what it meant, because I still have mine, all 5 of them, lined up in my closet.
Good for you. I obviously didn't play your game, but I've covered your game for a long, long time. And I've had the opportunity to spend lots of time around and get to know a lot of the greatest coaches in the history of your game. And back in 1977, late in that football season, the year after they won their Super Bowl.
Minnesota. Out here in the Coliseum?
Right out here at the Rose Bowl.
Rose Bowl.
They were 12-2 at this point in the next year, and they were about to play the Rams at the Coliseum in a big national game. So the LA Times sent me up to Oakland to spend the whole week before with those Raiders. That was the Renegade Raiders, the runaway Renegade Raiders. There has never been a collection of misfits and psycho personalities like the group that John Madden was coaching at the highest level at that point. And it was one of the wildest weeks of my life. But I got to spend some time around Coach Madden. And my biggest takeaway from that week was he's coaching lots of Hall of Fame bound players. And our younger viewers are not going to be able to appreciate this, but I'm talking about Ken Snake Stabler. I'm talking about Fred Biletnikoff, one of the great possession receivers in the history of the game.
You have an award named after him in college football.
Thank you. Dave Casper, the Ghost.
The Ghost. The Ghost to the post.
Cliff Branch, one of the greatest deep threats in the history of this game. Ray Guy, the greatest punter in the history of this game. Gene Upshaw and Art Shell, both of whom went on to do great things post-football, but they were 2 of the greatest tandem offensive linemen in the history of this game.
They were.
John Matuzak was one of the all-time craziest characters in the history of this game. So was Otis Sistrunk. You remember him?
I do remember Otis.
And you want to talk about a defensive backfield with the great Willie Brown. He was right up there. He's up there with Revis and Dion. He's in the league.
Old man Willie. We got the pick, and you see it on NFL film when he's running down the sideline against the Minnesota Vikings.
And then the 2 safeties, Jack Tatum, the fiercest hitter at safety ever. And George Atkinson, one of the great trash talkers in the history of the game. That's that group that I covered for that week.
You love our Ted. With Ted Hendricks, I don't think he was there then.
Okay.
He was there.
I'm not sure. He wasn't a starter on that team. But the point was, to a man, before, during this time and then after this time when I would see these guys post-career, I never heard one negative word about John Madden. I am here to tell you that no players I have ever covered loved their coach more than this group loved John Madden. And he had only 2 rules. You show up on time for everything, meetings, planes, kickoff. You show up on time, and you play your ass off. That's all he asked, was those 2 things. And you do it with discipline on the field, because he would not tolerate offsides or false starts or any of those things. He would not tolerate it. They played clean football. They played fierce football. This was the most physical football team I have ever seen. John Madden and this group invented what I call Raiders mystique, because they had it.
It was all about intimidation football, Skip.
Okay, so in all my years of covering all those other great coaches, 2/3 of the players, half the players, a quarter of the players, they just wouldn't like him because he was a taskmaster. He was a tyrant.
Especially during those times.
Yeah, it was all of the above. And I don't want to name names, but you know who I'm talking about. Everybody else had something wrong with him according to the players. And yet this guy was more beloved by players than anybody who ever coached. So I want our younger viewers to understand that he invented this art of coaching by saying, just be yourself.
Right.
I don't care who you are. It doesn't matter what your hair is, because his hair was crazy wild. Madden, and he was once described as looking like an unmade bed, and he did look like he didn't care what he looked like. He wore a sideline pass during games on a string, and it was just flopping in the wind, and it just looked like, are you just some guy on the sideline, or you like a photog, or what are you? Well, I'm the coach of the Raiders. And his shirt tail was halfway out, and he didn't care how he looked.
He did not.
He never cared how he looked as a broadcaster. It was all in the presentation of what actually goes on the air, what actually goes on the football field. What do you put on tape? What does it look like? Well, it looked like a Super Bowl. That's what it looked like. So to me, his greatest attribute was he was up there with the greatest coaches ever. And I can only give you one stat that will validate that. You realize his winning percentage of 75.9% of the games that he coached in the regular season, he's 103. You said 32 losses. He won 103 games, lost 32, and tied 7. For any coach with at least 100 victories, that is the highest winning percentage in the history of football. And I believe that his broadcasting, and then the greatest video game ever attached to his name, overshadowed the fact that this is who he was. And he always said, people ask me, am I a broadcaster or am I the video game guy? I'm a football coach. And it all translated into the video game because they came to him and said, we want to do 7-on-7 in the video because that's all that we can get in there. No, I refuse. And it took him 2 years to figure out, because he said no to getting 11-on-11. So you have to get the full compliment because he's a coach.
Because here's the thing, Skip. The reason why people think of him a broadcaster and a Madden, because he did both of those things longer than he coached. He was a broadcaster. He only coached for 10 years. Now he was a broadcaster for 30 years, and the game bears his name for 1988. So almost 34 years, the game bears his name. So he did those things, but it just goes to show you that how great he was at the ladder, that it overshadowed his greatness in the beginning.
It absolutely did.
Very few guys, and you know this, being around this and being on television, there are a lot of guys that can talk. When we're just in production meetings, or we're just off camera, they can talk. But when that red dot goes on in that camera, they freeze up. He was able to, a lot of people can talk about it, can say it, but he could do it. He could translate it in the simplest of terms for people that did not play the game of football, that doesn't know what a fire zone is, or doesn't know what a cover 5 or cover 6 or skip or bunch formation is. They don't know that. He gave it to you in simplest of terms. If somebody comes, somebody needs to replace the guy on the defensive side that came on the blitz. The guy didn't replace him. The receiver saw it. The quarterback saw him. They were on the same page. Touchdown. That's it, Skip. It's not no 3-by-1 where, you had a fire zone week and the guy went away and nobody came. He didn't do that.
Nope.
Because he's like, hold on, unless you're a football guy and you do this every single day, you're not going to understand what I'm saying. Let me give you basically, Skip, there's a book called Something for Dummies. It's computers for dummies or golf for dummies. Coach Madden made football for dummies. The casual fan that didn't really understand football, he made it in the simplest of terms and said, well, here you go. This is it. It's so easy for you to digest.
He did. Okay, one other story to drive home how much he meant to his players and how much he loved football players, how much he loved Shannon Sharpe and Sterling Sharpe, was the Darryl Stingley incident. And I know our younger viewers are not going to be able to remember this, but this was the night of August the 12th in 1978. It was a preseason game in Oakland, New England visiting. Steve Grogan was the quarterback and threw an errant pass to Darryl Stingley, who had just agreed to a contract. He hadn't signed it yet, but they had negotiated a deal that was about to make him the highest paid receiver in all of pro football. And Jack Tatum, aforementioned by me, fiercest hitter in the game.
They called him the assassin.
Yep, the assassin. He came in, and it was not an illegal hit. He just caught him just right, as sometimes happen. It was like a very unfortunate accident, but he caught him just right as he went up and left his feet to try to catch a pass that was virtually uncatchable. And it sent Darryl Stingley on a stretcher to the hospital. And John Madden, after that game, was so distraught about what he had seen on that football field that he went to that hospital. I'm not exaggerating this a bit, to see how Daryl was. And he found that he was in even worse shape than John thought, because he became a quadriplegic after this, because it shattered vertebrae up in the top of the spine. And Madden was irate that no Patriots officials, no coaches, no players, nobody was there for Daryl Stingley except the coach of the other team, John Madden.
Right.
He spent the night with him, and he immediately called the airport to see if he could catch somebody from New England to say, hey, he's in trouble, man.
Right.
Somebody needs to come and be with this young man.
Right.
And he was patched through all the way to the team charter, which was taxiing at that point. And he said, would you please send somebody back? So they taxied back to the gate, and the business manager got off and came back to the hospital and stayed with Daryl. John Madden continued to visit Daryl Stingley at the hospital, a rival player. That's who he was. Trust me, I know all these coaches. They can be cold-blooded, they can be heartless, they can be ruthless. Right. He was none of the above, but he succeeded as a human on the most human level, because he let players be players, and they knew that he loved them.
He might have been the first players coach then, huh?
He was the ultimate players coach. So to your point that you opened up with, I got moved watching the documentary on Fox on Christmas Day. Ernestine got mad at me because I said, I got to watch the whole thing. She wanted to do Christmas before the game started. Right. And at the end of it, I got choked up. I got teary-eyed. I texted our man, Eric Shanks, who runs this network, that this was so moving that I actually cried at the end. And I got choked up because my pet peeve about life is people come and they go, and they pass, and then we eulogize them. And I always think, God, if only they could have been here to hear what we're saying, because we don't say it while they're living.
Right.
And fatefully and fortunately, the silver lining to all this is Coach Madden actually got to sit back and have all this hit him from all angles. It's an hour and a half long. I recommend you should go back if you haven't seen it and watch it, because it will get you.
Yep.
The impact of what he meant to all of football. And he got to hear it. He got to hear the greatest defensive player ever say, you looked into my heart and you told me what I could be.
Right.
And I became that. You, Coach Madden, made me a better player. And Coach is saying, I realize now what I never realized while I was going through it.
Yeah.
Well, how great was that?
Yes.
At least that happened.
Right? I mean, hey, when I'm negotiating my colleague, I'm on the All-Madden team. Y'all talk about Pro Bowls. Y'all talk about, hey, I'm on the All-Madden team also. That's what I said, Skip. Guys, color guys need to be careful using that term great. John Madden didn't call everybody great. If he called you a great player, the LTs, the Jerry Rices, it meant something. It carried weight to have John Madden say that about you. That's why I'm saying, Skip, man, I just want John Madden to say one time, did he say I was great? Did he say Shannon Sharpe had a great game? That meant something, because that guy that coached the Super Bowl, that had been around all these great players, Shannon Sharpe's one of them, or that guy's one of them. That means something.
Yep.
And you hear LT, like you said, universally regarded as the greatest defensive player ever, say that man looked in my eyes, looked into my soul, and told me what I could become. I became that. I owe that to him. I owe my career to him.
To him. So I conclude with two quotes from two of the most important men, decision makers in your sport of professional football in the National Football League. Roger Goodell, obviously the commissioner. Trust me, any huge decision he had to make, even to the last week of his life, Roger would call John to pick his brain. What do you think we should do? Which way should we go here?
Right.
Because Roger's conclusion was he was football.
Yeah.
And that brings me to my owner, Jerry Jones. He can say a lot of wacky things, but I loved what he said about Coach Madden yesterday. I am not aware of anyone who has made a more meaningful impact on the National Football League than John Madden. That's it. I can't sum it up any greater than Jerry summed it up. And Jerry's been around and seen it all and knows what of he speaks. That's a statement.
You know why? Commissioner Goodell would call Coach Madden. For the simple fact is, it was about football. It was not about the business side. It was about football.
Yep.
What can you do to make the game of football better?
Yep.
Not how much money you can make the players, how much more money you can make the owners. How can you make the game of football better?
Right.
And they knew that's where it came from. Everything that he said was about the game of football and making it better.
Well said.
And we will continue to remember John Madden's legacy, as all of us at Fox Sports are saddened by John Madden's passing, including CEO Eric Shanks, who was an essential part of Madden's game broadcast crew in the 80s and 90s. In a statement on behalf of Fox Sports, Shanks wrote, quote, "We are heartbroken by the passing of our great friend, colleague, and cornerstone, John Madden. On behalf of the entire Fox Sports family, past, present, and future, we will forever be part of John's team. We are all better for having known him, one of the greatest coaches and broadcasters of all time. John is an icon who will live on forever in our hearts and memories. Our thoughts and prayers are with Virginia, Mike, Joe, and the entire Madden family."
Thank you for watching. You can subscribe here to get the latest from the show, and be sure to check out more of the best clips from Undisputed, or go watch a few other segments from our other shows on FS1.